Okay, we are back with part two of Ruha Benjamin's Imagination, a Manifesto. And we just got two chapters left for this part, and that is it. So, chapter five is titled Imagining the Future. And Ruha Benjamin, referenced the robot dogs that I seen videos of robot dogs, especially robot police dogs. I saw a video of a robot police dog by the NYPD, and that shows you like how much money the NYPD got. They had the money to create a robot police dog, and you see all these robots that are in Amazon warehouses and trying to replace the workers basically, instead of like actually giving the workers a living wage. Is like, this is your answer to getting the work done. Um so she talked about how robot police dogs have been pretty much a propaganda tool of the US military imagination. And there was a Black Mirror. If y'all seen Black Mirror, there was an episode of robot dogs that killed literally an entire humanity. There's like one person that was left in the world, and there was still a robot dog that's still on the hunt for that person. So the person is trying to survive that robot dog. And yeah, if I remember clearly, they ended up destroying the robot dog. I forgot how, but they ended up surviving in the end. Spoiler alert. But that tells you like how Black Mirror like knows like what technology is going to be used, like pretty much to prepare for apocalypse. So and this is another thing that I didn't know what was going on, is that there are these different designs for the immigration border wall. And I'm going to show you a picture of this. This is called a teeter-totter wall design. So we got all these news about what's going on in the border, in these prisons that are being put by the U.S. government to put immigrants in prison, and especially immigrant youth. Like, imagine the youth that are in these prisons, and we have these wall designs to try to sanitize how violent the immigration border is. So so it shows you like how much is, it's like I had to tie this to liberalism. Like, liberalism literally tries to put a band-aid on something that needs surgery. And Benjamin also remembered a moment with a childhood best friend named Sarah, in which remember, Ruha Benjamin mixed with Black and Indian, and I think her dad is Black and her mom is well, I forgot, but she's mixed. She's biracial. But and she remembers playing with her childhood friend named Sarah, and they were good friends. Like, they did everything together. Like, they were playing with each other, do gaming and all that stuff. And that's what happens with kids. They're innocent. They naturally gravitate towards other people and try to play with each other. And she remembers this moment with Sarah, in which Sarah said, "You don't see different colored birds playing with each other." And that made Rob Benjamin go like, oh, okay. What are you trying to say? And stuff like that. So who tells you like Sarah clearly was propagandized by the world around her. Like, she knows like playing with Ruha was outside of the norm, outside of the dominant narrative. and she decided to make an anti-miscegenation comment about Ruha Benjamin's parents. So she's like, so it's pretty much telling you that there's blocks being stacked to propel what direction Sarah is going to go to. And she says, and Ruha Benjamin says, like, because my imagination is outside of the norm, like there's no space for the dominant narrative to have my input in. Like I have to continuously be the disruptor and be outside of the norm because I'm biracial, I'm black, and I'm Indian. But especially with my blackness, it's literally the reason I have to look at the world differently than a lot of white people. So, and white people never have someone like me in their imagination. So, she also went into how there's these agencies. This is in the UK that's going on. The UK has this thing called the Department of Dreams, in which it's an initiative that tries to reimagine the public square as collectively owned infrastructure. And it tells you about how architecture is literally someone's imagination. People come up with these things. Like they literally thought of designs, how it's going to benefit the community, and how will it benefit anyone. And the Department of Dreams is literally like an initiative where it try to gathers as many people that live in that community and how it can help them navigate the infrastructure better. And there is also this thing called the Guild of Future Architects. So it shows you like how science can be used as a way to propel the dominant narrative, and science can be used as a way to actually benefit community. So depending how you use the science depends on your politic. And Benjamin says here, our theories are the first draft of reality, and the stories we tell about ourselves lay the groundwork for the kind of world we then create and sustain the people we are imagined to be. And then she talked about a regeneration of social imaginaries, and that is by groups called the Transition Network, Rapid Transition Alliance, and the Environmental Change Makers. And she explained Rapid Transition Alliance is an international network focused on the climate emergency. This work often entails reclaiming the town's economy, sparkling entrepreneurship, reimagining work, reskilling, and weaving webs of connection and support that keeps resources in the towns and villages where it is created. Some places may focus on the local food, others on generating renewable energy, others rethinking local transport networks. And environmental change makers created community gardens and a large abode and cob bread and pizza oven where they have taught food gardening classes, crafted solar cookers, built little free libraries, and more. This this so it tells you like how much it's important to be community organizers. Like you literally have to gather everyone in your community and talk about what you want for your community. So I think that's what goes on in the United States, is that we have this such individualistic culture where we don't turn to our community to solve problems. We just tend to be worried about work, school, our own path, but not realizing like we can also share paths and actually help each other to survive and thrive. And she also gave the story of Vandana Shiva, who was trying to combat the Monsanto companies from taking over gardens and farms and everything of that sort. She is an agricultural sovereignty activist. So she sees like how colonizing space correlates with companies trying to charge food prices and not regulating the food industry to make sure they are healthy and things of that sort. So she advocates for things called she advocates for food sovereignty and seed freedom, and she talks about how Monsanto and Bayer patent and sell seeds, and she pretty much called them cartels. It's like, you got on about these Mexican cartels, but y'all are the business cartel of business. So they're the ones that don't tend to not get the prosecution. And Benjamin also says here, the problem we face is not the imposition of technological solutions and specifically artificial intelligence onto a pure and untouched nature, but a narrow definition of what even counts as technology or intelligence. The harms rain down not upon some pristine nature, but on a dynamic and diverse array of what philosopher of science Donald Haraway terms nature cultures, as orientation that has long existed among indigenous and Africana peoples. An appreciation for a deeply intertwined nature culture disrupts Cartesian dualisms of all kinds: mind body, self other, subject object, nature culture, matter spirit, and reason emotion. It is a framework that not only rejects a limiting Western worldview, but also invites us to enter a world where many worlds fit. While we like to think of human history as a story of innovation and progress, we so called moderns are guided by a dominant mythology or social fictions that fail to embrace our interdependence with one another and the world around us. Indeed, while we are drowning in an age of information, we are starving for wisdom. And and that's what Vandana Shiva wants us to get back into. She wants us, and this is a slogan called "Life as Property" or "Life as Poetry," and we want to go into a life as poetry route. Life as property is where we get all these businesses and corporations to try to make a profit out of any and everything, and try to police and militarize things. And life as poetry is when art and creativity is embraced. The soul is actually being tapped into, and community is being centered. And then Benjamin notes how Afrofuturism also can contribute to long-termism. And she defines Afrofuturism here. It names a centuries-old artistic and literary tradition and an ongoing social and political praxis that upend the whitewashing of the past and future by creating stories, images, films, and communities around the simple idea that Black people are in the future. So that's pretty much everything that is the resistance movement to everything that the tech industry is trying to do. Trying to create these utopias and not trying to incorporate other things into it, but they want to colonize and imperialize, basically. Same goes for this indigenous futurisms. There's an indigenous futurism as well. And yes, she says here, indigenous futurism advocates for the sovereign. It dares to let indigenous creators define themselves and their world, not just as speaking back to the colonialism, but as existing in their own right. That is not to say that the past is ignored, but rather that it is folded into the present, which is folded into the future, a philosophical wormhole that renders the very definitions of time and space fluid in the imagination. A fluid, decolonial imagination is exactly what is needed in the face of fixed tropes of progress and innovation that seek to colonize our very conception of how to craft worlds in which we can all thrive. And let me see if I got anything else. She talked about how high tech contributes to wildfires and floods. So you're trying to be an eco. She talks about eco-fascism here, and how high tech industry. And what's interesting is that Silicon Valley is in California, and every year there are wildfires in California. Coincidence? I think not. And she said we need to embrace this thing called low tech, which is low dash TEK, which is local traditional ecological knowledge. So she said we need to go back to our roots in ecology and actually go back to farming and stuff like that, which I definitely agree with. Like, we need to go back into things before colonialism and corporations actually try to take over everything. Because right now, when it became this discussion about tariffs and all these other countries, and the United States doesn't really make its own products like it used to, it's pretty much the reason why everything is like getting more expensive and things like that. And she also talks about what was it, the man's technology. Who I forgot who said that. She said the man's technology. Yeah, Elaine Brown says that. She quoted Elaine Brown saying, "There was substance to the Panther's slogan we will memorize. The spirit of the people is greater than the man's technology." And the man's technology, white supremacy and patriarchy. Um, she gave an example of when she went to this island called Quadrilero in Majuro Marshall Islands, and it's literally a U.S. military base. And she was talking about her experience being in that base and talked about how militarized it is. It's like the utopias that the tech industry tried to support. All that is in this military base. There's literally like a golf course, a Baskin Robbins, a yacht club, um, a manufactured suburbia occupied almost entirely by military personnel and their families. And she talks about the quadrillion residents that live there, and pretty much how is pretty much the United States using the military as a way to colonize this territory. So she got the opportunity to be with the community, the Quadrilla community. She got to do some arts and crafts with them, and she really appreciated her time with the kids there. She talked about how play deprivation robs so many of the time and space to exercise imagination, dreaming, and theorizing. We must confront with this seriousness we might address other forms of theft. So, and yeah, she had a picture of her with the kids when she got on that trip to the Marshall Islands. And this is the last chapter of the book, chapter 6, entitled Imagination Incubator, which is very short. She talks about how there are types of futures. There's possible futures, plausible futures, probable futures, and preferable futures. It's up to us what we got to do with all of those futures, and the ideas that we have to put in place for them. And she talked about a lot of these community activities that she got to partake in, especially during the pandemic. She got this thing. She participated in this Zoom call for with someone named Michelle King, who created this thing called Making Us Up. She's called it MSU University, in which she was in a group setting with people in a Zoom call, and they get to just say, what is something that we can specialize in? And people were typing fried egg expert, pool expert, typo master, animal noise maker, master reassurer, corny joke maker, and it was like an opportunity for people to get in touch with their inner child. So I think that's also helps when you get in touch with your inner child. You got to just imagine everything that you were imagining when you were a kid. Just go in a state of play that actually gives you some joy and healing. And she said, like, sometimes you need a balanced seriousness with silliness, which I definitely agree with that. And there was something else. There was another program that was doing something. Yes, it's called Welcome to Acorn, and this was in reference to Octavia E. Butler's Parable of the Sower, which is a book that is definitely on my list. I did haven't ordered it, but that is definitely a book that I need to get into because Acorn references the book because there's a community called Acorn, um and it's pretty much imagining yourself in in the setting and parable of the sower. And there was another activity by Michelle King in which there are words on the screen and people pick like three words and put them in a and put them in this pre-made sentence. And Ruha Benjamin picked apocalyptic, lullaby, and grieving. And when she put them in the sentence, it says, the prompt says, in an apocalyptic future, there is a lullaby related to grieving. I thought of a loudspeaker system that plays throughout our neighborhood every night, like the Muslim call to prayer. So is so it tells us like we need to go back into um having a space to create and actually embrace ideas. And she actually quoted Octavia E. Butler, and Octavia E. Butler said, "Every story I create creates me. I write to create myself." And I think that was a statement because that actually makes sense because it's like a lot of what makes art is by lived experience. So it's a lot of learning that go into the art, and it makes you into the person that you are. So putting them into art form gives pretty much puts meaning into it. And they also talked about making sure these imaginations remain sacred. And she talked about she referenced the movie 12 Years a Slave and how Solomon Northup probably just never imagined himself being free and was able to be free. Like he eventually did get free, but he had to keep that hope and imagination alive in order for him to escape. And she referenced Saidiya Hartman's point that for those bound to a hostile land by shackles, owners, and the threat of death, an imagined place might be better than no home at all. An imagined place might afford you a vision of freedom. An imagined place might provide you an alternative to your defeat. An imagined place might save your life. What are the imagined places today where life is deemed sacred, despite all attempts to reduce people and the earth to bare life? And she said like sometimes these imaginations tend to be the ones that get criticized and judged. So when you're in these organizing spaces and you're advocating for your community, you have to prepare for the critiques, especially critiques that are uninformed. um, but also take into constructive criticism that might actually help the cause. Benjamin says here, the first step we can all take to unleash the potential for freedom, dreams, to transform this wailing world into a place where all children can play is to quiet the cynical voice in our heads and stand watch, guarding the borders of our imagination. And this is the last story that she got to share in the book is when COVID-19 started to take over, her family got into bee farming. So they started to take care of bees and try to produce the honey and everything of that sort. And she said she learned a lot from the bees that she got to farm. And she said like how interesting it was that the bees were isolated at first, but once she put the bees together, the bees aren't aggressive towards one another. They actually just intermingle with each other, and they've been isolated from each other for a while just to so they can produce the honey. So for them to socialize like that is like honeybees, they do a lot of work to problem solve, to build consensus into creating the honey, even though they were isolated from it. They just met these other bees. They understand that there's work to be done and they have to make the honey. So she says like she's she referenced this book called Honeybee Democracy by Thomas Seeley, and he said honeybees make decisions collectively and democratically. Every year, faced with the life or death problem of choosing and traveling to a new home, honeybees stake everything on a process that includes collective fact finding, rigorous debate, and consensus building. And Benjamin says here, so while bees are incredibly hardworking, collaborative, and democratic, I suggest that the essential ingredient to their world building prowess is that bees see beneath the surface to the breathtaking reality of their environments. And like bees, amid planetary upheavals of all kinds, we too must develop the capacity to envision astonishing possibilities in our own backyards. So let's be visionary. She made a pun for that. So I think that's actually cool because so it's telling us like, and that's what I'm thinking about when humans are the only species that are living this way and try to make money as a token for survival. And it's like these other animals, they don't have to do all that. They don't have to go to a grocery store or something like that. They literally just find food where they need to be in order to survive. And it says like how much we just let our divisions categorize ourselves through divisions and put ourselves in these systems in order to operate in society. And the honeybees, they do none of that. They just get to be and just make the honey because that's what because even though they've been separated, they know that there's possibility that they get to be useful in some regard to their community. So that's kind of powerful. Like that's something that humans can learn. But yes, that is all from Imagination, a Manifesto by Ruha Benjamin. This is the type of book where you do need to prepare yourself for a lot of information being thrown at you about tech fascism and ecological stuff. And so you got to prepare for things of that sort. But if you like trying to understand what is going on with AI and what's going on with why all these Silicon Valley and big tech people are doing to create visions that exclude oppressed people. And some of them, they got the people members of that oppressed group with them. So you have to think about what's actually beneficial for the collective imagination in building a world where everyone is actually supported and included and empowered and liberated. And that is all that I got to say about that. So thank y'all for staying with me through this part. I was surprised kind of how short it was, so I could have probably kept part one, but yeah, stay tuned for another book. It's probably going to be not until after New Year's I'm going to do another book because it took a lot of energy for me to like actually get back into this book because I did chapter 1 and then it took me a long time to get into the other chapters because I was going through so much. But yes, follow my raisinsouls page on Instagram, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and feel free to watch my other videos. I really appreciate and learned a lot from what this book has informed me about what's going on in regards to technology, because I didn't really think about how technology and racism go together, but I really should have known because it's like clear when it came to like these robot police dogs that I saw on Twitter or something. So yeah, stay blessed, and hopefully see y'all soon for another book. Okay, bye bye.